At the cemetery, a man he hadn't seen in 15 years stood at the same grave. Macron couldn't bring himself to leave his master's grave. The man turned to him with a familiar anger in his eyes. "You? Are you still alive?" he asked with pain. He had never forgotten this man and never wanted to see him. Macron was 68 years old, but every Friday morning his conscience drove him down the same path. He would leave home at exactly 8 a.m., buy red roses from florist Anna at 8:20, and enter the gates of Oak Ridge Cemetery at 8:45. 15 years. He had never missed this routine. This was the only regret left in his life. "Good morning, Maestro," he whispered to Antonio Bellini's gravestone. As he carefully arranged the flowers, he continued, "This morning I thought of you again. As always." The usual silence. Macron knelt down and cleaned the dust from the gravestone. His fingertips traced over the letters. Antonio Bellini, 1940–2009, famous violin maker, master of art. Every week the same rituals, the same regret. But today something was different. When Macron looked up, his breath caught. About 15 meters away in the cemetery, a familiar silhouette stood. An elderly man holding yellow flowers, walking toward Antonio's grave just like Macron. This couldn't be possible. Guiza. Macron's heart began to race. 15 years. For 15 years he had been coming to this cemetery and had never seen Guiza. He wasn't at Antonio's funeral either. So why was he here now? Guiza approached. Macron could now clearly see his face. In his 70s, silver-haired with a tired face. But that familiar fire in his eyes was still there. "You," Guiza said, his voice cold as ice, "you're still alive." "I wouldn't have wanted to see you either," Macron replied. The two men looked at each other. Between them was 15 years of silence, but 30 years of enmity. Guiza slowly approached Antonio's grave. He placed the yellow flowers next to Macron's red roses. "What audacity," Macron said harshly. "How dare you come here?" Guiza turned to him. His eyes had filled with tears. "Audacity? I come here every Friday, for the last 15 years. Every Friday at 9:30. And when do you come?" Macron froze. 9:30. I come at 8:45. The two men looked at each other. 15 years. For 15 years they had been coming to the same grave, only 45 minutes apart. They had never encountered each other. "Why are you here?" Macron asked, accusation in his voice. "Why?" Guiza's voice was trembling. "Because Antonio was my everything, my teacher, my father, my life, and you stole him from me." "I stole him." Macron's voice rose. "You worked in his workshop for years, gained his trust, then stole his secrets and opened a rival workshop. You're the traitor, traitor," Guiza shouted. "You betrayed Antonio. He taught you violin making, saw you as a son, but what did you do? You sold his final masterpiece, that 1742 Guarneri violin, a piece that was never meant to be sold." Macron's face turned ashen. I didn't sell it. That violin was stolen." "Lies," Guiza yelled. "Antonio told me everything before he died. You sold that violin to an American collector for $2 million. "No," Macron said, his voice cracking. "No, you have it wrong." "Then tell me the truth," Guiza said. 15 years have passed. Antonio is dead. There's no reason to hide the truth anymore." Macron collapsed to the ground. His hands were shaking. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay, I'll tell you. But first you tell me. What did Antonio tell you?" Guiza also sat down. Two enemies sat facing each other on either side of Antonio's grave. "Antonio," Guiza began, "called me in 2008. He was crying on the phone." "Guiza," he said, "Macron disappointed me. He sold the 1742 Guarneri. That violin shouldn't have been sold. It should have gone to a museum, shown to the world. But Macron chose the money. He didn't choose me." That night Antonio had a heart attack. He died 6 months later. Macron was crying. "No," he said. "No, that's not how it was." "Then how was it?" Guiza asked. Macron took a deep breath. "In 2008, Antonio got sick. It was cancer. Doctors said he had 1 year to live, but the treatment was very expensive. Experimental treatment in Switzerland, $2 million. Antonio had no insurance. His savings weren't enough. Guiza listened silently. Macron continued, sold everything. My house, my car, my savings. But I could only gather $800,000. It wasn't enough. Antonio was dying and I was helpless. Then what happened? Get married, have children, be happy. This is my final gift. I cried. No, maestro, I said. I'll sell this violin, but for your treatment. He looked at me. There was such love in his eyes. Macron continued without pausing, but Antonio refused. No, he said, I'm 68 years old. I've lived. You're younger. You live. I didn't listen. I secretly sold the violin. I got $2 million. I gave it all for treatment. Guiza's eyes widened. You tried to save him? Yes, Macron said. We took him to Switzerland. He received treatment for 6 months. He was getting better. Doctors called it a miracle. But what? But Antonio found out the violin was sold. One day in the hospital he turned to me. Macron, he said, did you sell the violin? I couldn't lie. Yes, I said, for you. That day Antonio cried. I entrusted it to you, he said. That violin belonged to the world. Now it's in a collector's safe. No one will see it. No one will hear it. Macron put his head in his hands. That night Antonio had a heart attack because of stress. While I was trying to save him, I killed him. A deep silence fell over the cemetery. Guiza spoke quietly. Antonio told me something else. Macron looked up. The day before he died, Guiza continued, he called me to the hospital. Guiza, he said, I need to confess something to you. Macron sold the violin for me. I was very angry, but now I understand. He loved me, just as you love me. Macron's tears flowed uncontrollably. Guiza pulled a letter from his pocket. Antonio gave this to me. He asked me to give it to you. But I was so hurt, so angry. I never gave it. 15 years passed. Today, I finally found the courage. Macron took the letter with trembling hands. The envelope read, To my beloved Macron, my son. When he opened it, he saw Antonio's handwriting. Dear Macron, if you're reading this letter, I'm no longer by your side. I want to tell you how sorry I am. I was angry at you for selling that Guarneri violin, but the truth is, I was only thinking of myself, my own aesthetic ideals, my own understanding of art. I couldn't see your love, your sacrifice. You tried to give me back my life. I only gave you anger. Now I understand. A violin, no matter how valuable, is just an object. But you are a living person. You are my son. Please find Guiza. He loves you too. You two hate each other, but you both love me. That's enough. Please make peace. For me, forever yours, Antonio. After reading the letter, Macron couldn't speak for a long time. Finally, he looked at Guiza. 15 years, he said slowly. For 15 years I hated you. Every Friday I came here thinking of you. Guiza thinks I'm a traitor, I would say, but he doesn't know. He doesn't know what I did. Me too, Guiza said quietly. I thought about you too. Macron killed Antonio, I would say. He chose the money. But now I understand. You chose love. The two men looked at each other. There was no longer anger in the old eyes, only fatigue and regret. Guiza, Macron said, I have to do something. I have to get that violin back. But how? $2 million. I don't know, but I'll find a way. I promise, Antonio. He turned to the gravestone. Maestro, I swear, that violin will come back. It will go to a museum. The world will hear it. Guiza stood up. He extended his hand to Macron. Let me help you. The two of us together. Macron looked at him, a 15-year enemy, but also Antonio's other son. He took his hand. Together, in the following weeks, Macron and Guiza began meeting regularly, not just at the cemetery, but for coffee, at the workshop, for quiet conversations. Guiza shared stories Macron didn't know, how Antonio opened his first workshop, how he made his first violin, how he came into the world as a young apprentice. He was the most patient man, Guiza said one afternoon as they sat by the grave. A violin would take 6 months, but he never rushed. Guiza, he would say, hurried art cannot create, it only produces garbage. Macron learned things he hadn't known. Antonio's youthful loves, fears, dreams, how he once lost a competition and almost gave up art. But then, Guiza continued, an old man told him, Antonio, you lost because you weren't good enough, but if you give up, you'll never be good enough. That day Antonio worked 16 hours, and he never stopped again, but their growing friendship also brought pain. Both shared the regrets they carried. I wish you had come earlier, Macron said one day, his voice full of regret. I wish we could have talked 15 years ago. Guiza put his hand on Macron's shoulder. But we're talking now. That matters. Antonio would be happy about this. One day Macron brought big news. Guiza, he said excitedly, I found the collector, that American. He still has the violin. What did he say? He said, he wants $3 million for me to get the violin back. Guiza's face fell. $3 million? Where will we find that? Macron smiled. I made a plan. We'll make a violin together, in Antonio's style. We'll sell it. We'll save the money. But that will take years. I know, but we'll do it for Antonio. And so, two old men in their 70s began a dream. Every day, side by side, they worked in the workshop. Hands were no longer as strong, eyes no longer as sharp, but hearts were still full of fire. It took 2 years, 730 days. Every day they got a little closer. A violin took shape, a masterpiece, and finally, one autumn day, the violin was finished. They named it Antonio's Legacy. They sold it at Sotheby's auction house, price $3.2 million. With the money, they went to the American collector. Here, Macron said, $3 million. We want the Guarneri back. The collector was surprised. Did you really do it? You made a violin and raised $3 million. Yes, Guiza said, for a promise. The collector nodded. Okay. The violin is yours, but one condition. What? I'll hear this story. Why is it so important? Macron and Guiza told Antonio's story, about love, about sacrifice, about friendship, about regret, about healing. The collector listened. Finally he stood up. You know, he said, I've kept this violin for 15 years, in a safe. No one saw it. No one heard it. That was wrong. Antonio was right. This violin belongs to the world. He gave back the violin. Take it, but not just for $3 million, free, because your story is more valuable than this violin. Macron and Guiza took the violin. They donated it to the Metropolitan Museum. On opening day, two old men stood side by side. The violin, behind glass display, shone under the lights. Maestro, Macron whispered, we promised. Here it is. Guiza smiled. Antonio would be proud. From that day on, every Friday, at 9 a.m., Macron and Guiza went together to Oak Ridge Cemetery. Red roses and yellow flowers, together on Antonio's grave. You know, Guiza said one day, I think Antonio planned for us to meet this way. What do you mean? I think, Guiza continued, he deliberately told us to come at different times, so we'd miss each other for 15 years. Because he knew, we shouldn't meet until we were ready. Macron laughed. Maybe you're right. Antonio was always the smartest. The two men sat quietly. Two former enemies, now two old friends. Macron, Guiza said, yes, do you forgive me? For 15 years of anger? Macron put his hand on Guiza's shoulder. I forgive you. And do you forgive me? I forgive you. And so, at a graveside, two enemies made peace. A master's love brought them together, and his legacy will live forever. On Antonio's gravestone now was a new inscription. Macron and Guiza had it engraved. Antonio Bellini, famous violin maker, master of art, and father of two sons. This story reminds us how destructive enmity can be, but how healing love is. Sometimes the people we lose bring us together when we need it most. And most importantly, true legacy lives not in objects but in hearts. Macron and Guiza, even after death, carried Antonio's love. And this love transformed two enemies into two brothers.